I was thinking at one stage, let me just show you by folding this, of doing something much more like, let's just turn that a bit, something much more like that. So homing in very much onto the washing, which is the sort of the focal point of the painting, probably eliminating this shadow here. And if you wish to concentrate just on that, then that is absolutely fine. You must make up your own minds, especially in this first stage, what it is you're going to put into your composition. But I'm decided that I'll use it like this. I can't remember whether I've cropped it from the original photograph. And I want to show something of the sky and the daylight here. I want to show something here which maybe will give a little bit more depth to the painting. And I'm going to try and keep as much of the foreground working in this painting as I can. The focal point, and in fact the title of this painting, is the washing hanging up here. And I will try and capture, as I said earlier, this sort of sleepy siesta, too hot to be out. Only Englishmen, mad dogs, would be out in weather like this. Everybody else is tucked up having a little doze inside the house. The real purpose of this drawing is to get sorted out in my head the composition. I've said that I wanted to show some sky, and I've said also that I want to show some foreground. So I just want to be aware that I want to have some space here for the foreground and some space up here for the sky. So let's just see if we can begin. It's actually on a, as I said, on a fair mountain, this Monte dei Bianchi. So there's quite a slope leading down here. So this part is quite long. Right. Let's think about the washing, roughly where that's going to go. I'm going to take up this sort of area. This is a part of the painting that I want to try and keep as much the color of the paper and make use of the white of the paper. There's a sort of drain pipe there. There's a window up here. And there's a window here. Balcony. Take the balcony over a bit more. And an umbrella, yellow umbrella. Take that up a bit higher, I think. I said I wanted to give myself a little bit of foreground. I don't want to sell myself short on that. Another window here. This one's open. And that's got a bit of washing hanging down as well. I'll make this a bit longer, this washing. What have we got here? We got And down here, there's difficult to see what there is going on because it's such dark shadows, but there's a doorway of some kind here. I'll make that one up a bit higher. And got some bushes here that might be quite useful later on. Various pots. Okay, do I need to have anything more in the drawing at the moment? I think that's where I'm going to with my drawing. I've got some sky in here and trees and background. I've got some foreground that I can play with here. My focal point, which is the washing, is here. Windows. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Let me have a look. I won't worry about that too much. A lot of it's hidden in the shadows. There. I think that's as far as I'm going with the drawing before I move on and start painting. So, if that's okay, I'd be very happy for you all to crack on and sort out your own drawing, your own composition of this scene, however you wish to portray it on your paper, whichever way around you want to use your paper, whether you want to reduce the image in some way just to that or add bits to it. Over to you, everybody, and good luck. The second phase of this painting is about putting light colors down. Very much that is what's going to help to give us a large part of the feeling of there being sunlight on this. I will try and work this in as much as I can wet on wet. The whole thing will be fairly wet as we work through it, and needs to dry then before we get to the third phase, but we're way off from that at the moment. I'm going to begin this with, you can see this, with raw sienna. I'm using a large mop brush here. Very useful, it comes to a nice point as well. So I've got lots of water on this, and I want to put the paint everywhere except for the laundry, and I've just put it on the laundry. Right, okay, so let's just slop this on fairly thinly. I'm going to come back and add to it, and all I really want to do here is, there's another sheet hanging here that I forgot. Let's just put that in. Yeah, that's quite a good one, that. Let's just, yep, got that one. Let's put him in, and so I'll just work around some of this linen here to try and avoid painting on it. I'm bound to forget. All right, loading up lots of water here. I'm not painting outside the house, just the house. And when I come down to this area here, where it's sort of grey concrete, I'll put the same colour in, but I'll run it over very lightly
Someone's asking, did you wet the paper first, Mark?
No, I didn't. No, I'm just using lots of water on my brush. Yeah, I didn't do it. You can do, but I'm just using lots of water in my brush. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Let's just... Yeah, you should have the laundry still untouched. Now, I'm going to come back to that. It will still be wet when I come back to it in a moment, but I'm going to move up now to the sky. And this one is going to be, and if you can see that, is French ultramarine. It's a really cracking blue sky. Little bits of it you can see. You can see it particularly up here. I'll leave a gap of white there. That will be quite useful a little bit later on. And I'm going to bring some of that paint down here. Add a bit of water to it, but where I want a good blue, I'm going to have it up there. Now, there are trees in the background here. Much of them are in shadow. So the way I'm going to handle that is picking up some lemon yellow and putting that down in the spaces that I've left here. And just let it paint itself in. Like so. I'll put a little bit of lemon yellow there, I think. Right, that's something we'll come back to later on when we come back with our dark colors. So let's move along back to this area here and put in some local colors. What about I'm going now to my yellow, cadmium yellow, or this is Aurelian yellow, and I'm going to put just bits of it here that I can use for the foliage. Let's pop little bits in here. I'm going to pick up some reds and just pop them around here. I'll just have a little bit of red showing at some stage later in the painting for the flowers that are in this bush here. I bring in something here for the grass. I'm using a color called sap green, but you could mix your cadmium with a bit of cobalt or something like that, but fairly lightly. I'm just putting in something like that here, and also I think I'll get that sap green and I'll mix a little bit of French ultramarine with it. I'll just put something here a bit different that I can make use of a little bit later on. Just dropping those colors in there at the moment. Why don't I put something here to do with the umbrella? Just put that in, and now I'm going to go back to this building here and start to add a little bit of patina to it. So why don't I pick up a bit of raw sienna, add a bit of blue to it, maybe, not much, just, and I'm going to bring this in. The paint's still a little bit wet, and I'm just going to bring this in with the edge of my brush, and it's fairly dry brush on the background here. I'm just wanting to mess up the texture, add some texture to the building. Let's just mix a little bit more of that, a little bit of raw sienna, and I just picked up some blue that was there. Anything, it's a sort of grey that I'm bringing into it, just a little bit here, not anything to make a big difference. I don't want to make it too dark, but let's just see if that will just add a little bit of texture. But my brush is almost dry at this stage. Try and avoid the washing hanging up.
What colour did you put on there, Mike?
I went for some raw sienna, and I just picked up a bit of blue that was in my palette here. I've just done that here, and I've just brought that over. Whilst things are still a little bit wet, I don't want to get everything too dark, but that's going to be fine. You see, I'm just playing around with bringing in different sort of colours. I'll bring some of that here, and in fact, this is all happening whilst the paint is wet. I think there we are. That's probably enough. Oh, I've gone over my washing here. I keep forgetting that little bit of washing. We'll have to dump that out and work with that later on. I have to make it a different color piece of washing. There we are. That's as far as I've gone now with putting down the light colors, some sort of idea of the yellows that are going on here that I can use in the potted plants, the background, dropped in some lemon yellow here, but allowed it to very much flow in with the blues of the sky. And then I deliberately did the building first, went to the sky, came back to the building, because I wanted the paint to be quite drying, but not totally dry. And then using a slightly muddy color that I just took it across as a dry brush to try and give some patina or aging to the building itself. So it's not pristine raw sienna color. Okay. This is the third stage of the painting, and here I'm going to be putting in the darker colors. The fourth stage after that will be putting in details. But here we want the darker colors. We want to start breathing some life into the scene that we've got here, which is a fairly wishy-washy sort of thing at the moment. And there isn't necessarily any great order in which you might want to do these. I think, generally speaking, I will work from the top downwards, but I may well jump around a little bit.
Bob's asking if the board is elevated.
It's very slightly on an incline. Yeah, I've just got an inch or two of a wooden plank underneath it here. Just holding it up. Just give it on a slight incline. I prefer to do that if I can, but if it's a nuisance, I could lay it flat. But we'll go with that at the moment. Okay, you can see that all right, Lois? Can you?
Yep.
Okay, let's just get those colours in. Right, and put in some detail here. So I'm probably going to make quite a lot of use of this little mop brush. It's smaller than the one I have tended to use up until now, but it's still squirrel hair, and it still is quite nice because it comes to a point. So you can use it in a number of different ways, including some fairly fine lines. So let's just see how we go with that. I'm going to I said I'd sort of work from the top downwards. I think I'll leave this background a little bit for the moment, and I'll just work on some of the things that are, or will I? No, I won't. I'll do the background. I'll do the trees and all of that sort of stuff. So I've left. It's a good warm blue. Is this French ultramarine blue? And I've got little patches of it. But much of the, as the photograph shows, much of this background is in shadow. And specifically, I want it to be pushed back so that the emphasis is on the building and especially the washing. So the colors I'm going to use for that will be, I'll pick up some lemon yellow and add to that some ultramarine blue. Lemon yellow and ultramarine blue. It gives me a sort of more of an olive sort of color. Let's just make some of that, and I will probably add to it some. I'll make it darker with ultramarine blue, and also I may well use some of this neutral tint here as well. But let's just see what I want to. So we'll bring in. I'm just using the edge of my brush here and allowing some of the yellow that's there. I don't want to paint it. I want to use some of that yellow and leave some of it. So this isn't, it's not terribly strong at the moment, but I'll strengthen that in a moment, and we'll bring in, bring some of that down here. I haven't used the point of the brush, I've just used the side of the brush very much to paint here. And whilst that's still a bit wet, I'm going to darken it up with more French ultramarine. In fact, I'll add a little bit of burnt umber to that, just to make it darker. And I'm going to paint this in, not necessarily over what I've just painted, but alongside it to allow the paint to run into what I've done. So, you know, I'll put some of it here, for instance. I'm trying to allow the yellow to still show up in places. And now I'm going to make that quite a bit darker. I've got some neutral tints. I'll add some French ultramarine into it. And let's just put in some darker areas. Here I'm using different sides of my brush to suggest little branches. So chancing your arm, you hope that the sort of marks you're making will be helpful and give some sort of feeling of the trees in the background. And the darkness of this is going to help to push the building forward. I'm conscious that I want some sharp bits of whatever this bush is sticking up here. So I can create those in advance by just making some of those marks. Right, maybe that will do. And if you want to, no, I think we'll just leave that and see how it works with the rest of the painting when we get there. So that's made some sort of statement about the background. How much more we need to do will depend on how the rest of it goes. Okay, let's work on down. I'm going to this color burnt sienna. I'm going to put some, I think, drain pipes and windows. They're all pretty much the same color in here. Burnt sienna. And let's put in some these drain pipes. This one that runs down the entire building. Until it sort of runs into the plants and things down there. All right. The shutters, they are partially open, these ones. And so I'll just put some of this color down here for the moment. Keeping the laundry clean. Let's see how that'll do. We can come back to details on the windows. This window similarly is half open, just slightly. Okay, and this one's open. This side too. I've used raw sienna, I've used burnt sienna here, just as a background color. On that. Right, let's bring in a few other little bits of color that come in here. I'll add a bit of red to that. And put a few little flower pots here. Maybe put something in here, flower pot wise, something down here. Dress the garden a bit. I'm just adding them where I want to put them. Things that might be useful for flower pots. And add a few little other colors that I think might be quite useful to play around with. I quite like this, something bluish back here. There's a sort of blue sign of some kind here. Oh, bless you.
Sorry. I didn't realise my mic was still on.
Just adding a little bit to that red here. And I'll bring some green in around here, I think. So let's go back to, what was this green I mixed up? That's a bit dirty, that one. So let's add some sap green or lemon yellow and ultramarine. Something green here. Just put that in. The sun is coming pretty much down. This being midday-ish here, so we've got no shadows stretched across this painting to any great detail at all. When it comes to putting shadows in, just bear that in mind. So a little bit of greenery going on here. Now, any other little details I want to put in? Some sort of a lamp going on there. There is a doorway here. It shows it as yellow, but I will carry on with some yellow there. Why not? I'm going to do something about these two bushes here. So let's mix up something a darker green. I'll go back to my lemon yellow and add some ultramarine blue to it. And I'll make this one a little different by, how can I make it different? Let's add some gamboge to it to see what color. That gives me a good olivey color here. Yeah, that's just something like that, just so that we've got something a little different. I'm still using this squirrel moppy brush here a little bit and leaving some spaces. Bring some of that green up here. What I'm thinking all the time is my next stage is going to be the finished stage where I'm going to do the details. I'm just setting it up now so that I can do something with the detail. Let's make some sort of a grey color with Just add a bit of red to that. This is alizarin crimson. Yeah, it's sort of grey colour. This is the only bit of the house we can see into. So let's put some of that in there. Right, now I'm going to put the shadow on it. The shadow. So the colour I'm going to use for that, let's just clean up, get some space I can use. This is the shadow that I'm going to be putting on, is the shadow that goes here, here, underneath the laundry, here, down the side, here, under the windows, inside the building a little bit. That's all part and parcel of this sort of darker phase of the painting. At the moment, it's all a bit flat. We want it to step out of itself a bit. So I'm going to use French ultramarine blue for this. And mix some burnt sienna with that. So French ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. I want to keep this shadow quite blue, so don't go too heavy with the burnt sienna, otherwise it will become a brown sort of shadow. That's something that I'm not wanting. And I also will make myself up a reasonable quantity of this color. So that's a bit too blue. A little bit more of that color. Yeah, that's a little bit more burnt sienna. We'll just grey it down a bit. So I use just two colors, French ultramarine in the main, and then burnt sienna. And now I'll work down my picture. And how are we doing? How wet is it? It's a little bit damp there. Let's just give that a touch with the hairdryer. Okay. See how this is doing. It should be dark enough. Again, I'm still using that squirrel mop, thin small mop here. I'm going to paint my shadow down to, say, something like that, coming off here.
What was the shadow mixture again? Someone's asking.
French ultramarine blue and burnt sienna I used for that. Okay. All right, we'll put some shadow in underneath this washing hanging down. This is underneath the umbrella. There's a table here. I've got to draw that in, so I'll come back to the table later on, leaving something showing of the pole that's holding up the umbrella. I'll take that edge of the balcony right up to here. Part of the trick, I think, with this laundry is to try and get the feeling that it's hanging away from the building or the balcony or whatever it's on. Let's take a shadow down here, down this side of the drain pipe. The shadow comes under this bit of washing. It's got little frayed ends. I won't put those in. Put something down here at the moment. There's some sort of a odd seat or other here. these windows, I think what I'll do with these is just get a slightly dirty burnt sienna color, and I'll just make a few little marks like that. We'll come back and put some of the louvres in a moment, but really not in a lot of detail. Come back to those in a moment. Back to my shadow. I run a shadow down here where the windows are open. There's some sort of a lintel there. Put that in there, go back to the shadows, and then there's a shadow that runs and a little bit of shadow down the side here. If you wanted to use a finer brush for this, something like a rigger, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea. I'm conscious that I'll be coming back later on with the details, so I just want to get in something of the shadow at the moment. And I think so often when you're painting, there's no need to do a absolute straight line all the way down. Just break the line up a little bit. Let's put some shadow in here and under here. I don't know what that is. Something, there's a sort of lintel here. So I'm putting a few little details inside the window here. Again, I'm conscious that I'm going to be coming back later and adding something that's darker still, but gives me something to work on. Okay. I'm using my rigger. I'm using adding a bit of water to the shadow, and let's just make a few little lines here. These are shadows coming from various different things, which we can run with later on. I'm going to bring some shadow in down this area here in a moment. Let's see. Maybe some shadows where there's a sort of change in the concrete or what the facing of. So I think I'll make use of that. I'll just put. Come back to that in a moment. Right, I'm touching in shadows in one or two little places that I think might be useful to put them just at the moment. Now this area here is, I'm not quite sure, there's obviously a building coming down to it and there's some shadows being cast on it here. So I think I'll try and link this shadow up now with what's going on here. Let's just go back to my larger brush and shadows that run here are much softer than the other shadows. So I think what I'll do is I'll pick up some water in my rigger and I think it's probably shadows from a balcony or something like that. That's just water, but I'll if I drop my shadows onto that water, it'll sort of paint itself as something much softer shadow-wise. Let's just see what that does.
Pam saying she can't see to the left edge where you're currently painting. That's better.
And I think before I move on and bring in, yeah, I want to just break up this wall a little bit more. So let's just have a few marks. There don't want to be too many. Just where the shadows are, maybe just little marks in the wall here. I'll come back and I'll play with these when I bring in my detail later on. I talked about this bit of the building being a little bit different from this, and I think I've gone back to my palette and I've just sort of picked up something that's very very slight sludgy grey. It'll do me fine. And I'm going to just take that along here, just to add a little bit of contrast, interest. Again, I've left little bits showing, and I've just made a very light little wash over that. Yeah, that's the next bit of the painting where we're going to come in with the details. Will hopefully lift the whole thing up. But I think we've now got on there our light colours, our dark colours, and we can come in with the details in a moment to lift it all up. Okay, that was a bit of a long session there, so let me just recap on that. The painting was very light, bland almost. We'd left out the spaces as much as we could for the washing. I've completely forgotten that bit of washing. Then when we came back to the darker colours, I started off with the background here, just bringing in some darker colours, so they merged in with the yellows that are there. I really didn't want to overcook that, so we'll just see how that's going to look in a moment. And then painted in things like the burnt sienna of the drain pipes, the shutters, started bringing in some other colours, the yellow of the umbrella. Now that looks as if we've lost the shape underneath the umbrella, but when we come in with some darker colours, that should lift the shape back out again. And then brought in other colours, the greens and one or two other little colours here that would help, and then went to the shadow and put the shadow in. This area here, I just want that's a bit too, it's got a nice light on it, but I'm going to rough that up again in a little bit while. And so I've done that. I've made one or two little marks around the walls just to break it up a little bit. I've put a few shadows of trailing wires. Completely forgotten that bit of laundry. And then I just felt that rather than have a building that was all the same all the way down, I just thought I'd break it up a little bit by the quite often the colors you're using are things you see what's in your palette and you think, oh, I'll just add a little bit to that, and that's a nice sort of a gray color. The reason it works as a warm overall warm color is because of the raw sienna we put down to start off with, but we've sort of been painting over the raw sienna ever since we put that down. All right, now we'll see if we can pull the painting together by bringing in some detail, adding in things that, in the main, this is going to involve very dark colors, but if you wanted to bring in some other things that maybe you'd left out, that would be a good idea. So let's just have a look. I think what I'll do is, I'm allowed to dry. I'm going to add something here for that pot of flowers, and I'll pop oops, all gone dark. There's dark color on there, so it's too much water. It's all gone dark, so we let that sort itself out. And I'm going to mix up a dark color with in the palette here. I'll go to French ultramarine. This is probably the color that I think I and a lot of people use more than any other color. It's certainly the one I'm always buying most of, French ultramarine blue. But I'm going to add some burnt sienna I'm making a dark sludgy colour here. Probably darker than anything that I've got used so far. Digging in, you can't see that, can you? Digging into the burnt umber. I got a dark colour, and I also want it to be pretty thick as well. So let's just get a good colour there.
Sorry, can you repeat what these colors are that we're mixing?
French ultramarine blue, which is this one. Let me come here. This one that I'm mixing here, and then I've got a burnt umber here, but you could use raw sienna or whatever. And I will probably, if I want to make it even darker, I'll probably add some neutral tint to it later or as I go along. Okay, so I've got a dark color there, and I'll see how I get on with my rigger. Maybe I'll go to a bigger brush. So I've got my rigger loaded up here with a lot of that dark color, and let's see if we can start to bring in some little details. Are we okay with this? Yeah.
Quite done.
Yeah. Little details.
Here. This. Exit.
Somebody's still on. I'm just going to mute you, whoever it is.
Can I ask what neutral tint is?
It's I think Payne's Grey is the closest to it. The only difference really between the two is the neutral tint is more translucent than Payne's Grey, but Payne's Grey would do the job really well. I often don't use Payne's Grey on its own. I tend to use it if I'm by adding it to other colors to make them darker. So here I'm just putting in some little details. Little marks, which the shadow line that I drew across here. Let's just take that across there, and maybe line there. I'll work downwards so I don't end up smudging everything. Let's have a look at these shutters that we've just made a little stab at. I'm going to add a dark there, and the angles of the shutters are going that way. So just make a few marks like that. I really don't want to get involved in the tiny detail of those shutters. So come across this shutter. A little bit of dark in there just to try and suggest some depth. Looking through the shutter area here, let's have a look at what's going on here.
Maureen's just asking, if you've got a minute, can you tell us the difference between transparent and ordinary paint?
Yes, you First of all, as far as watercolor is concerned, you really have the option of getting good quality professional artist colors or student qualities. The pigments, well, there's a difference in the price. The pigment is always much better in the artist quality, and as such, that when it comes to mix the paint, when it comes to put water on it and gather the paint up, if it's artist quality, it's much, you use less paint and it's much easier to do just that. One of the problems with student quality is that you are having to dig deep to get the paint to come up to the quality you want, the strength you want, and you often don't manage to do that. As far as transparent and opaque is concerned, when you buy paints, you can buy the pigments in all sorts of different definitions. As far as transparency is concerned, the transparent paints are much better at being able to see through to the color below. The opaque paints tend to block out more the color below, and the extreme understanding of that is if you use gouache. Gouache is a form of watercolor which is very opaque. It's great to use, I love it, but you put one layer down and it will block out pretty much what's below. If you're using a transparent watercolor, you put one layer down on top of another, and you see that other color coming through. So for instance, we put down raw sienna on here, and then we put down other colors. This one here, for instance, this was whatever it was, I can't remember, it was a mixture of transparent paint, and that allows the raw sienna to come out and shine through. So that's a sort of explanation of that. So I'm working my way around the painting, putting in details here. Let's have a look at some of put some details showing through the shadows of the door. Maybe here, just a few little marks, things going on. I talked about this umbrella earlier. And just do something. The umbrellas may be showing up a little bit better now. And so is the pole that's holding the umbrella, a little bit better. Right, what's happening down here? I think I'll dig out my sword or dagger brush here. I just want a bit more paint in, and I'm not quite sure what's going on here. So let's just make a few little marks. Enough of that. Right, I'm going round the painting, just adding little bits of detail where I think it will add some strength to the painting, a little bit of depth in places, just and where I think maybe it's too dark, too here, for instance, I'm just adding a little bit of water to the dark grey that I've produced, just to make it not quite so dark. Just a few marks here suggest.
Has anyone else got sound from Mike?
That's because Mike's not saying a lot. Is that okay?
Yes, there's sound.
Can you hear me? He's concentrating hard. Right, I'm working my way around this painting, sort of tending to come down this way, largely to avoid smudging it. So putting some of that dark into the window here. Add a bit of mystery, what's going on inside that siesta house. It's just sort of a window here. I've completely lost that washing. I'm going to have to just forget about that, I think. Right, this area here, which is really a bit too pristine. Maybe I should have done something about that before. Let's just add a bit more interest to it. And I'm popping around the painting and just add wherever I think it might be useful to add a bit of texture. Now, this washing. Let's make this a blue sheet.
Oh, bless you.
And I'll make another one, a pink one. Tiny little bit of color, maybe. I still want to grey down this area. It's too pristine. So what I think I'll do is just dry it a moment with the hairdryer. Go back to my mop, pick up this sort of slightly grey colour here. All right. I picked up some burnt sienna here. Just because I just wanted something red here for a moment. Pop some marks in there. And as part of the finishing off process, I'm just going to bring some white into it now. Changing my water. So in this last stage, I went around with a very dark color and added details underneath the drain pipes, the windows, into the windows, behind the windows, into the shadows, made some sort of marks around the umbrella there just to bring out that underneath the umbrella. And now I'm got some white. This is gouache white color here. I'm digging into it with my rigger. And do I want to make any few little marks? Just and be as selective with these as possible. some of these bits of string. And that's the painting finished. At least that's where I'm stopping.